Hey, good morning to you. We are here with John Richardson and Keith Redmond. We don't have a lot of time. John Richardson has to get to the dentist in about 30 minutes, and so John has done a more research, and he's been here to create this presentation on the updated covered expatriate gifts for 2025, which is a little bit much here, John. So joining us today also is Keith Redmond, and Keith and I will be discussing a little bit after John hangs up and has fun with the dentist chair. So John, let's get started. We don't have a lot of time. So here we are. So what happened here? We have updated regulations?
Well, actually, what we have are the first set of regulations. June 17th, 2008, the HART Act, in addition to creating the 877A exit tax, created the 2801 covered gifts rules. Basically, they have been without regulations and without enforcement since that time. Effective January 1st, 2025, the regulations we're discussing today are in effect. So that's sort of the bottom line. And this is significant, it's interesting, and it certainly illuminates what is clearly the biggest problem of being a covered expatriate. So let's run through the slides here.
Right on. Okay, let's go. All right.
Okay.
And go ahead, John.
As I say, January 1, 2025. Now, what it says is that this section applies to gifts or covered bequests after January 1st. Doesn't say anything about that before. It's not clear to me whether that means that in a more basic sense, the rules apply. But in any case, this is where the action is from this point on. Next. Okay, now this stuff is a lot harder than I'd actually thought. In fact, the regulations are 129 pages of gobbledygook, understandable only by people with a background in both expatriation law and estate and gift planning, compounded by the fact that this combines aspects of both the income tax and the estate and gift tax of the Internal Revenue Code, different subtitles, and significantly different definitions of residence, okay, to add to the fun. Next.
All right. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Basically, what they're confirming here is that for the purposes of 2801, now this is in the estate and gift tax section, right? They've created a special punishment for people who receive bad gifts from covered expatriates, and they're using the estate and gift tax definition of residency. Now, all citizens always get the worst of everything all the time, okay? But the definition of resident for the estate and gift tax thing is a non-citizen, non-domiciliary, as opposed to the definition for tax residency, which is just a green card holder, et cetera. And this has some interesting consequences, I think. Next. Okay, you can see this is a snapshot of the Internal Revenue Code. Okay, notice, the subtitle B. Now, I want you to notice, okay, that chapter 15 is where this is. Notice they created a new section, gifts and bequests from expatriates, okay, 2801. So this is relatively new, but not enforced. Continuing on here. Okay, this is the most vile, vicious, unprincipled piece of legislation, or at least it's in the top 10 of anything I've ever seen come out of Congress. It's purely to punish, okay, people who have the temerity to renounce U.S. citizenship or abandon the green card. And basically, if they, for the most part, if they're worth more than over $2 million, et cetera, they carry this covered expatriate designation for life. All right, and this is extremely dangerous, because what it means is that if they then make a gift while they're alive or a bequest on death to a U.S. person, are you ready for this? The U.S. person is going to be hit with, this is a little bit of an overgeneralization, but it gets the point across, a 40% confiscation value of the gift.
There it is.
40%. Okay. Now, this is just over the top. They claimed originally that this is just to, say, well, if they kept their U.S. citizenship and if they died as a U.S. citizen, then perhaps the estate would have been subject to a tax. But it ignores the fact there's a $13 million exclusion, ignores a lot of other things. This is just pure confiscation of assets. That's all it is. No more. So there we go. And I'll be talking about this in a second, but understand that these are necessarily foreign gifts. Foreign gifts. So remember that we've got the penalty for not reporting these as well, right? So I mean, this can really add up quickly. We'll have an example at the end. Next.
All right, great. And by the way, I just put in the super chat the link to our previous video on covered gifts, where we go a little bit more into the whole issue. So you could follow that if you. This is really more of an update. Okay, go ahead, John.
Yeah, so then the question is, recipients of gifts who are neither U.S. citizens nor residents, I think, are not subject to this tax. That's what I think. Okay, I haven't totally sort of figured this out, but again, say you're a green card holder who's gone back to the old country, so to speak. Remember, they're not using the definition of residence for income tax purposes. They're using it for estate tax purposes. So, again, interesting an inequality between your status. Are you a U.S. citizen? Or are you perhaps a green card holder, depending? Adding complexity as well. Next. Okay, now here's the point here. Here is the point, the message today. You've got to avoid being a covered expatriate. Okay, you've got to avoid being a covered expatriate, because if you're not a covered expatriate, you're not making a covered gift, and none of these problems exist, other than, of course, the receipt of a foreign gift. But again, you've got to avoid being a covered expatriate. And now what this is, I think, a very, very practical consequence for families of overseas Americans who basically have U.S. citizen children. They expect the children are going to remain U.S. citizens. They can't survive under the existing U.S. tax system. It's critically important that they renounce before they hit the 2 million U.S. net worth thing, because they can avoid the status of being a covered expatriate and therefore are going to be able to leave their estate to their children. In other words, renunciation is now necessary to protect the family estate in some circumstances. It also accounts for, of course, the family renunciation. Remember, a family that renounces together bonds together. Next.
That's right.
Okay, now I'm going to emphasize this point again, okay, that a covered gift. Now, a covered gift is a gift that comes from a covered expatriate, okay, or a bequest. I'm going to use the words interchangeably. But remember that because they're an expatriate, it's likely, very likely, that it's going to be a foreign gift. So don't forget the requirement to report the foreign gift. Remember the penalty for not doing so, 25% of the value of the gift. Next.
And by the way, if you're just joining us, I just want to welcome everyone today. We're talking about updates to the covered gift rules for expatriates. And John's we're going to go through this very quickly. And then we'll be discussing a little bit. Keith and I are going to be discussing at the end. So, all right, let's get going. Next slide. All right, there, John.
Okay, covered expatriate. Now, here we're shifting back into the income tax part of the thing. Okay, and we know what that is: net worth greater than $2 million, average tax liability greater than $190,000, or failure to certify tax compliance. Now, there's always this question, why bother to come into compliance? There's your answer. Okay, right there. Right there. The problem is not so much the exit tax as it is the covered gift. And by the way, to be clear on this, okay, this is the value of the gift regardless of your net worth at the time that you renounced. If you renounced and you had a net worth of $3 million, you leave a $100 million estate, the U.S. government is going to want $40 million of it. Okay, 40%. Next. Okay, now as always, blessed are the accidentals. Blessed are the accidentals. Okay, because remember that if you can avoid covered expatriate status, you avoid the whole problem. Remember the dual citizenship exemption from birth that we've talked about. Once again, all right, we have, accidental Americans. There's no question about it that they have privileges. They're privileged U.S. citizens. I think the best example, they can have $1 billion in net worth and not be subject to this. Okay. Next. I'll say it again. Dual citizens from birth win big. Now, family planning. Okay, for younger anybody. Okay, you can see the benefits of having your children born as dual citizens. So if you're an American citizen, think about having them born in another country, Mexico, Canada, countries that give birthright.
Oh, wow.
You've got to protect yourself from this. I think that this is now moved into, I think, responsible financial planning, citizenship planning. Remember, if you're nothing but a daughter of the American Revolution, a direct descendant, perhaps of Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, they will want your assets. Okay. Next.
That right there that's probably a video of its own. Why you're better off moving. While you're better off moving abroad to give birth to your children, because that is a huge advantage.
No question about it. No question about it. Next.
Yeah.
Now, statute, of course, has always been there. And, we've talked about the general principle. Now we're going to talk about the regulations. The draft regulations actually were released in 2015. There have been almost no changes to them, although they're now official. The bottom line, though, is that we now have binding regulations, and this is incredible. Okay, it's 129 pages. It could not be understood. I think from this point on, we're going to have the Section 2801 tax lawyer, specializing in this type of stuff. They are incredibly punitive. Okay, remember, they're just trying to, bring this stuff into sort of practical application. I'll give you a couple examples that are so this is just over the top. Okay, what they've done. But the main point is this can't be understood by the average person. So once again, we have, these looming liabilities, these opportunities to have your assets confiscated that nobody could even imagine exist or could understand without the help of high-priced help, okay, even if they knew of them. Now, there's a link, okay, to the whole document. The regulations themselves start on page 70. Next. Okay, now some of the highlights here, okay, just some, because we have a very short period of time today. But the first thing is that the burden of determining, okay, whether 2801 applies is on the donee. It's on the donee. So if you are given, for example, a piece of real estate and you don't have cash, you better find out if you got it from a covered expatriate or not. Because if you got it from a covered expatriate, you're going to have to come up with 40% of the value to pay the tax, right? Now, as part of this, okay, notice how the U.S. tax code, whether it's FATCA or something else, basically turns people against each other, okay? Now, the IRS also is apparently, okay, they're going to put together some kind of a mechanism now where somebody can check from the IRS whether somebody was a covered expatriate. Okay, I mean, you'll find this discussed in the regulations. So, I mean, this is amazing stuff. But the point here is, again, that the regulations clearly put the burden of determining whether 2801 applies on the recipient of the gift or bequest. Okay?
Oh,
and it gets
sort of
worse.
Thinking there, right?
It gets worse, Anthony. Next slide. It gets worse.
Oh.
Now, here's the bottom line. If it's a gift, if it comes from somebody who's alive, there's a presumption, okay, that the person is a covered expatriate if the person is unwilling to sort of, give information, etc. Okay, so this is really amazing stuff, right? The bottom line, by the way, is avoid U.S. citizens in any capacity, regardless. Okay, it's not worth the risk. Next. Now, we only have a short period of time. The complete list of the insanity starts on page 70. Next. Okay, now I'm going to remind you again, everybody, about the information reporting problems. Now, I'm talking about this on the most basic possible level, as though we're dealing with individuals. Remember, 6039F requires the reporting of foreign gifts, right? 25% penalty if you miss it. Yes? Okay, we've talked about this. And under 6048, we have the requirement to report the distributions of trusts. Now, I have no time to get into this today, but the regulations go on at great length about different kinds of trusts, et cetera, et cetera. Again, this is completely outside the comprehension of anybody but a tax lawyer. Next. Now, let's work with an example here. Okay, so facts. And just talk about this to give this some meaning. Expatriated U.S. citizen. Okay, expatriated U.S. citizen expatriates with a net worth of $2.1 million of assets. So we know he's a covered expatriate, right? And of course,
Yep.
he would pay the exit tax. Okay, now for reasons of simplicity, let's assume, although this is not accurate, that it's $2 million and 1 cent, okay, and that these are all the assets, $2 million, then an exit tax is paid on that $2 million. So the first point I want to make is that the $2 million has already been taxed, okay?
Yep. Got it. Yep.
Now, let's assume, all right, that the person's net worth grows to $20 million, okay? 30 years later. He makes a gift of $20 million to his U.S. citizen daughter. Okay, now she fails to file the report return. Now let's look at what's happening here. Now, the first thing that happens is because of the failure to report the foreign gift, the IRS is going to want $5 million of that 25%, right, as a penalty, without regard to anything else, right? In addition to that, they're going to want 40% of the $20 million.
Okay. They're going to want 40% of the 20 million.
Right.
Yep.
So that's million, right? So already we're at $13 million. Okay. Look at this is just what the law says. Okay. All right. For those out there who think, oh no, this can't be true. Okay. So they want that, but I want you to notice also, okay, that assuming it includes, the initial 2 million, that's being taxed a second time. You see that?
Yeah. Yep.
All
I'm
right.
seeing that. Yeah.
So effectively, we've got, 3 levels of confiscation going on here. Okay. Now let's imagine. All right. So, yeah, so far, so you see how bad this is?
This is like peak United States of America. This is
absolutely. It's the U.S. at its finest. Okay?
Yeah. This is exactly what the United States of America is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, this is incredible. And I bet you there's people who are watching me right now who don't believe this, who think I'm making it up. I bet you. Okay. All right. But in any case, so we're at 13 million. But I mean, maybe we look at the bright side, they get to keep 7 million. That's not bad. Okay. But now, 5 years later, all right, 5 years after they leave a bequest of an additional to the same daughter who is no longer a U.S. citizen or resident. In other words, what the daughters did was enough is enough. I'm expatriating, right?
Yep.
Is the next 10 million subject to any of this? No, absolutely not. Gets to keep the whole thing, at least from a U.S. tax perspective.
Wait, is that 10,000 or 10 million?
Oh, I think it was supposed to be 10.
All right, that's 10 million. All right, okay.
10 million additional. Yep. Sorry about that. I did
no
this.
Problem.
Anyway, an additional 10 million, whatever. Okay, but the point is this. Notice the punishment for either having been a U.S. citizen or being a U.S. citizen. Do you think the U.S. likes its citizens?
Yeah, the United States of America has contempt for its subjects, is what I would say.
Okay.
So, pure contempt.
Yeah, now this is really bad. Okay, so next. Okay, and by the way, I'm talking a bit about this on the most basic sanitized level there is. Wait till you start getting into the interaction of trust and things like that. I mean, it is absolutely unbelievable here. Okay, now some concluding observations, if I can read them. Kind of small print. Okay, so 2801. let's see. It's basically okay. Actually, hang on a minute. Oh, now I can read it. Sorry. 2801 exists for the sole purpose of punishing both donors and donees of covered gifts. It's purely punitive. Okay. Now, I want to point out that the IRS actually, I think, is somewhat sympathetic to this because in the preamble of this, they point out that the original intent was somehow to make it indifferent between expatriation or not. Okay. Which, of course, even on a charitable interpretation is wrong. But what this does is clearly punishes people for expatriation because even if this is sort of a recapture of an estate tax, people still don't get the $13 million, deduction, so to speak, right? Okay, so that's the first thing. This is pure punish. It's pure hatred. It's pure hatred. Okay, of people who expatriate or whatever. And why do this to green card holders who return to the old country? I mean, it's unbelievable. Okay, it is unbelievable. So, it seems to me, okay, that as a general principle in life, it's simply best to steer clear of all forms of USness. Okay, too complicated, too punitive, too difficult to understand. I mean, can you imagine getting a gift and say, I have to know if you were a covered expatriate? Oh, and remember also
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
that under the proposals we've talked about this, they're now moving in the direction of requiring people when they file the 3520 to, put the name and address, whatever, whoever gave it to you, right? So we also have that problem. Notice that if a former U.S. citizen or green card holder dies, the most important question is, was he a covered expatriate? Not was he a good person? Not what did he do, but was he a covered expatriate? Okay. And
Oh
then,
my God.
finally, everybody needs a will, but more importantly, okay, you got to have their tax records. Okay. I leave you my tax records showing I'm not a covered expatriate.
Oh my God, John.
Anyway, this
Yeah.
is what it really is. Next slide.
I think that was it. Okay, here we go, and that's
Oh
where
yeah.
people
Okay.
can find you right there. So I know Keith has been patiently waiting because he's got some questions before you have to hop
Okay.
off.
So
So
quickly, 5 minutes, and I've got to go. So
all right, Keith, go ahead.
All right. One of the questions John already answered, so I don't need to bring that up. So, John, here's my question to you, and I am your lovable irritant because, as you know, I deal with a lot of people around the world over the past 12, 13, 14 years. So, here's a scenario: American overseas, never been in the US tax system, has renounced. That's all they did. They have not entered the US tax system, done nothing. They leave something to their children who also are Americans outside the United States and have never been in the US tax system whatsoever. What happens to them?
well, what happens to them is they're subject to the law. What they do is their business.
Okay.
Well, Keith,
Okay.
are you talking?
Applies.
These people sound like dual citizens by birth, though.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I'm just trying to
That's
think. I'm
different.
thinking off the top of my
That's
head.
different.
Sorry,
Remember,
even if they, sorry, let me just make this one statement. Even if they're dual citizens by birth, like let's say an accidental American, many of them just renounce and they don't do anything with the US tax system. So their children are not Americans, they're French or whatever, and they just move on with their lives. So where is the incentive
but
of
Kate,
even doing? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Kate,
You know where I'm going.
well, if their children are not U.S. citizens, then obviously they're not going to be hit with a covered gift tax, right?
Got it.
Okay, this is a problem only if you want to leave assets to U.S. citizens. Now, if they're not tax compliant, they're necessarily going to be covered expatriates. I mean, that's the answer.
But no, I
Your
hear
question,
you, John.
what
I
incentive to
go
them?
ahead.
What the incentive is? Well, I mean, there can be all kinds of incentives depending on their connection to the United States. But let's say they live in France.
Okay.
Okay. See, maybe they don't even want to renounce, right? Because in France, they have the benefit of that tax treaty that, essentially exempts U.S. source investment income from French taxation, right? I don't know.
Right. Right.
Whatever. I'm just telling you what the law is.
Oh no, I know that, John. I know that, but I'm just bringing up the question of people I've dealt with who have renounced and have not done anything with the U.S. tax system.
Well, the answer is they're covered expatriates, and they can do what they want with that fact, right?
Okay. Okay. Fair enough.
Other questions, thoughts?
Well, yeah. So here's where my thinking goes is like, well, hey, look, we're promised some relief for double taxation for U.S. Americans abroad. Maybe we'll see what happens. But
Right.
wow, this is really going the other way of showing the total insanity behind this. And so one of the basic questions I have is that, look, I know where the basis for the income tax come from. It comes from the 16th Amendment. Where do we get the basis for a gift tax? Where in the Constitution is that? That's kind of where I'm wondering. I'm like, well, that's weird. I know there's an income tax. There's a 16th Amendment for income derived from any source whatsoever, but a gift is not income. It's a gift.
Well,
So,
that's right. I mean, this type of tax, a state gift taxes, have a much longer history than income taxes. I mean, that's all I can really say on it. Although
well, no, but I would say from the state level, sure, absolutely. States have had gift taxes, inheritance taxes. But my wondering is, well, where in the Constitution did states grant the right to the federal government to tax inheritance and gifts? And I'm pretty familiar with the Constitution. I'm pretty familiar with the amendments. I don't see it anywhere in there where the government can assess the gift taxes in there. So it just seems like, well, that's weird. We're punishing and confiscating people without a constitutional basis to do that. I'm sure there's some Supreme Court decision where they kind of bend the law to whatever to grab your stuff. But that is an amazing thing about the United States of America. It's very bold in claiming rights and powers it doesn't have whatsoever, and it just does it. I mean, that's where we are. It just does these crazy, crazy things that, I mean, really just a 40% tax. Oh, yeah. Why? Oh, because we can. Because we can. Because we do. Because we're awful. So that's kind of my first point. Is like, well, where's the constitutional authority for any of this? And, we are, and we have a Supreme Court that, will generally rubber stamp anything the IRS wants. Generally, there's a few exceptions here and there. So I think that's the first problem. But then, and I think the second problem is how American citizens are treated the worst by our government than anybody else on the planet. By anybody else on the planet. If you're a U.S. citizen, your number one enemy, I hate to say it, is your own government. And here is an example, another example through its vicious, weaponized tax code to just destroy you. And it is just breathtaking. And John, I thank you for digging into these things. We don't want to, normal people don't want to look into these things. It's like, looking at an accident scene, a crime scene. And that's what we have, John. We don't have a tax code. We have a crime scene.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, this is one of the worst things I think I've ever seen. But the worse it is, the less people are likely to believe it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, put up the comments. Say John's making it up. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think these are things people want to hide. When you confront people with uncomfortable things that they don't want to accept, they're just going to ignore. It's the cognitive dissonance. And when when the pain goes up too much, hey, look, we can keep people going for a while, but when we jack up we actually show what the pain is. People are like, oh no, our government isn't evil against us. Well, all right, what's your evidence that it's not? Because they say that? Is your evidence that the government isn't our enemy? Because, well, they don't say that. So therefore,
Anthony, okay, I got to go in a second. So I just want to repeat one thing. Okay. My basic message is this. All right. Today, anyway, Americans abroad who are in the U.S. tax system with U.S. citizen children who are not dual citizens from birth should seriously consider renunciation. Okay. So that they renounce not being a covered expatriate, so that they retain the ability to make gifts and bequests to their children. Okay? I got to go.
All right. Thanks, John. All right. Keith and I are going to have a little fun here to wrap it up here. Thanks, John.
I look forward to seeing it. Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Right on. All right, Keith. So what do you think? I mean, this is are you surprised this is awful, Keith?
No, I'm not surprised. Why would I be surprised? This is par for the course. It really is. It's pretty disgusting.
Go ahead.
No. It just puts people in a very difficult situation. And, I'm coming at it from a different perspective with the people with whom I deal, but there are situations where one has to be tax compliant to renounce, especially if they have financial ties to the United States. And this is just abhorrent. So it puts their children in a very difficult situation where they have to decide at a very young age to give up their US citizenship. No other country does this, that forces people to give up their citizenship. It's awful.
Because it's so awful, right? It's like, so why are people becoming covered expatriates? Oh, because the tax code's so awful. Okay, so what happens when you're a covered expatriate? Oh, we're going to continue the awful as much as we possibly can. We will continue because you dare complain about the conditions of your enslavement. That's what it is.
Right.
The government's mad at you because you're complaining about how the debt slavery system works, and so like, okay, now we're really going to punish you. So, I mean, I got to say, I think that the time really is, if you are on the fence to renounce, even if you are living overseas, this government is vicious. It's vicious and angry. So I would suggest, and I think this is the important thing, when you're renouncing your citizenship, you got to really do it correctly.
Well, you have to do it right, but you have to do it correctly based on not you personally, Anthony, but based on your particular profile and situation. But here's the thing: is what I see from my perspective with all this stuff. There's really no incentive. I hate to say this. Well, no, I don't hate to say this, but for people who don't have any financial ties to the United States, there's no incentive to get right with God with this stuff. There is no incentive. So
right, yeah, like let me comply, let me file that 3520 so they can track everything, right? It's really, I mean, it is amazingly terrible. Let's see here.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to so Keith, I want to just go and show everyone, like, hey, look, this is a pretty awful thing, but I want to show everyone your group on Facebook. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So here it is, and I just put a link to Keith's group on Facebook in the super chat. Here's this group, and this is for this is really for people overseas, but a lot of the issues overlap for Americans. Here, maybe you're here for a little bit and you have assets overseas, so it's a great place to join. I really suggest everybody going there to check it out and join on Facebook. It's a great community. How many? Look at that, 11,000 subscribers or followers now, Keith. Yeah, and let's see here. We're getting our Cheese Mouse has a comment coming in. Okay, Cheese Mouse has what about is written here? Voluntary withholding agreements. All right, let me check. Let me just check that out. Cheese Mouse. Let me just see what I can find out about that here in the codes there. Hang on, let me get that here. And voluntary withholding agreements. All right, I'm not sure about that. Let me just check on the voluntary withholder.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that particular term.
And this must be for, my guess is voluntary withholding agreements. Let's see what we got about this. This sounds really exciting, Cheese Mouse. Okay, let me get this up. Here we go. And oh, there we go. We got it. Nice. Okay, so here we go. Employer, let's see, put in maybe enter into agreement for provide the withholding of income upon payments of amount. All right, I think this looks to be, is the executor of the estate. Okay.
All
right. Well, I look at this regulation, and this is really for the employer-employee relationship. So I don't see it as what section of that is where? Oh, yeah, and these are employment taxes. If we look, Cheese Mouse, if we look up, this isn't really applicable because if we look out, we're in employment taxes and collection of income at tax source, employment taxes and collection of income at tax source. So really what we're talking about is the employee taxes that the employer has to pay, Social Security, Medicare. So that's really what that's about.
Right,
so I don't see that
outside the United States.
Yeah, and so maybe your question is: the executor of the estate liable for anything? And boy, you know what I would say here? Let me get your comment up here because this one, my default answer is going to be if there's money there, maybe. That's what I would say is that if the government thinks that the executor was in on avoiding the payment, then that would actually get elevated to something criminal, to tell you the truth. So anytime there's a big amount of money and the IRS is hungry and wants to make an example, that's when you got to really think about something, get some great advice on that, maybe even more than one. So thanks for that, Cheese Mouse. Thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate that. Let's go back to, I want to go through. So we went to Keith's group, and I want to just go back to Keith's group again. Just follow that, and I'm on there too. You could see a lot of things. Now, Keith, I want to show you something I did.
Yeah.
You ready for it?
Sure.
You're going to be ready for it. Here it is. I created a webinar for people. Offshore disclosures done right. And if you're thinking about renouncing, and I got to say, Keith, you know where I got a lot of the information from? This podcast. And, one of the number one things I have in this is every situation is different.
So, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are interested in getting on one of these webinars here, I'm going to put it in the super chat right now, and you can sign up. Okay, yeah. So Cheese Mouse. So here it is. And by the way, I'm still trying to figure out. So I'm not. Yeah, Cheese Mouse. I'm not sure. Cheese Mouse has another question. I know the employment taxes. The executor comment is a separate comment. Got it. Okay, yeah, but I'm not sure that the applicability of the employment taxes to cover gifts. That's the only thing. We're in totally different parts of the code, so that's where I'm a little lost. But hey, you sound like you know a few things, so please educate me if I'm wrong on that. Let's see here. So, and we'll just see any other questions coming in. Keith, what else would you have to add on this today? What would you have to add?
Well, as my usual mantra is that people need to explore all of their options, all of them, before they take any action. So that way they can see what is going to be the best option for them based on their particular profile and circumstances. That's the bottom line.
Well, boy, Keith, I think that really you're teasing this offshore disclosure webinar pretty good, because
right.
That's exactly what we get into.
Well, no, and it's important because I deal with a lot of people, and there are people out there that do need to get into the amnesty program, whatever it may be, depending on their situation. So I think it's important with your particular webinar for people to educate themselves, because it is an option, and it might be the only option for somebody. It just depends. There's no cookie cutter approach. But it's best to be armed with all the information possible before you make that educated decision.
All right, great. Well, there it is. And you'll see a lot of, if you join me on one of these webinars, you'll see that there's a lot of information from John and Keith, that I've been fortunate enough. We had this podcast going for a while. Then we restarted it, June of 22. And it's been amazing. We've covered so much topics here, pretty much on everything, but we're always looking, making sure if there's any topic ideas you have that we haven't covered, we really do want to let you know. We want to cut to that. So I don't know what else you got. So I think next, we'll be on. I think we're resuming. We were off for our holiday break, and we have some other things we want to discuss, and maybe we'll get to some of that tax reform as it sort of gets going there as well. All right. So I think that will conclude today, and I just want to, I want to thank John Richardson for his excellent, one of his other, going really, really deep into this. So again, you can find John at Citizenship Solutions, and here's actually his website. I had it up, I think, somewhere. Here it is. Here's his website. Citizenship Solutions. You can go there. John's got so much information there. He is a treasure trove as well. So that's a fantastic resource for you, along with the IRS Medic channel, where we really have gone so much into these issues. So, okay. So, and again, check out Keith's, if you haven't joined Keith's Facebook group, fantastic place to start to get information. And again, if you are thinking about, if you have an issue and you kind of want to get started with a low pressure, kind of just your basic investigation here, check out my webinar. I hope to see you on that. For John Richardson, Keith Redmond, I'm Anthony Parent for IRS Medic. Thanks so much for joining us today.